Good evening and welcome to We Will Be Heard, Stories to End Gender-Based Violence, a program where both survivors and perpetrators of gender-based violence share their stories through the use of digital media. My name is Rebecca Davis and I'll be your host for the evening. We Will Be Heard aims to move beyond stereotyped discussions, conversations and attitudes about gender-based violence through using the real stories of real people to elicit a more complex understanding of these very complex issues. At its heart, each episode has one particular story to illustrate one aspect of gender-based violence. Tonight, we'll be discussing gender-based violence and the law, and I have with me tonight 3 experts to help me do just that. I'll allow them to introduce themselves.
I'm Sanja Borman, and I'm from the Women's Legal Centre. The Women's Legal Centre does constitutional and impact litigation, and we also give free legal advice to women. We've seen a lot of women through the years coming to the centre to talk about situations they've had with domestic violence, as well as sexual offences, and the centre's also been responsible for some of the landmark cases that have advanced the law around the state response in particular to sexual violence.
Thank you. I'm Sindisiwe Moyo. I'm from Labantu. I work as a senior paralegal. Labantu is a non-governmental organization situated in Kukuletu. Its main focus is addressing violence against women, children, and elderly, and supporting those affected by violence.
Hi, my name is Rehse, and I work for MOSAIC Training Service and Healing Centre for Women, and we provide a comprehensive set of services to victims of domestic and sexual violence, as well as perpetrators of intimate partner violence. We're based throughout the Cape Town area and parts of the Winelands.
Thank you so much. As the focus of our discussion, we're going to be looking, as I said, at one particular story. And all of the stories used for these programs were created by the storytellers themselves as part of a digital storytelling program. Tonight's story is called For My Goddaughter, and it's by Toko. So let's take a look.
Dear little princess, it feels like it's been a long time since I welcomed you to this world. They said you were a big baby, but me, I just saw tiny feet and tiny hands. I am your godmother. You came just when I needed a reason to breathe. This is my story. It's Wednesday, 1st of March. Jacob Zuma is about to go on trial for rape. I've just returned to South Africa for my first ever international trip, and I'm excited. Little do I know that in just 3 days, my life will change forever. Thursday, I found out my job is hanging by a thread. Friday, I get dropped off a new cell phone and 700 rands. And Saturday, I get raped. I see the man when I open my gate and I feel uncomfortable, but he walks away. Just past midnight, I see him again, this time inside my house. I wake up disoriented and directly facing the sharp edge of the biggest knife I've ever seen. I know exactly what he wants. I've never seen the animalistic look that the man is giving me. After some failed negotiations for condom use, he proceeds to rape me. I guess the negotiations took some steam out of him. When he fails to get it up completely, he tells me I don't taste nice and leaves with my purse. I reported the case to the police immediately and I got medical examination and HIV post-exposure prophylaxis. I hate those pills. They made me so sick and so weak while my rapist went around free. But I finished them and I tested negative. Of course, like so many rape cases, mine never even got investigated. Nobody could tell me who the investigating officer was or whether the sample they took from my vagina held any clues to the rapist's identity. So you see, the day you were born, I was ready to give up on life. Why should I bother to live, only to be preyed upon by sick-minded bastards who took my childhood innocence and now my adult sexuality? Then I held you in my arms, and I knew I had to continue to stand against gender-based violence. I look at you and hope I can protect you from all the injustices I've experienced at the hands of men. So I continue to march the streets demanding freedom. I continue to use pen and paper to highlight the plight of women and children. When the struggle seems futile and my voice gets hoarse, I still carry on, my angel, just for you. I love you, princess, from your loving godma.
So obviously a very poignant and distressing story that we stole there from Thokozile Budaza, a woman raped at knife point by a stranger who does receive medical attention but nonetheless seemingly fails to receive any kind of redress from the legal system. So I suppose I'd just like to open with the question, how many aspects of that story are familiar to you and how many seem common or uncommon when we look at what's going on in South Africa every day when it comes to the legal recourse around gender-based violence? Sanja, why don't we start with you?
You know, I think the thing that struck me most about that story is the fact that she never even knew the name of the investigating officer of her case, even though she had gone to a police station and reported what happened to her. It's also interesting that her story was made in 2007, and at the end of 2007, of course, we saw the operationalization of the new Sexual Offences Act. And despite the fact that her story was made at a time when perhaps this act was not yet in operation, because it only came into operation in December of that year, her story is still familiar to this day, which gives that impression that even though we have a Sexual Offences Act that is very clear in what the duties are of the police, of the criminal justice system, and even of the health system, we're not seeing much of an improvement in terms of the response to victims of rape and sexual offences.
And can you just sketch out for us, what was it that the Sexual Offences Act was supposed to do that would be kind of revolutionary in terms of what had gone on before?
I think one of the most revolutionary things that the Sexual Offences Act was supposed to do is to expand on the definition of rape, so that we would have a far more realistic definition of what rape actually constitutes. Previously, rape was very narrowly defined, mostly took place between a man and a woman, whereas the new definition was supposed to give more scope to prosecutors to prosecute offences, police to investigate cases, and so on. And further than that, the Act was very clear, and is very clear to this day, on what exactly a police officer has to do, and what exactly a healthcare practitioner has to do, and what exactly a prosecutor has to do when it comes to a victim of a sexual offense. And I think the story demonstrates that, that is just not the experience of survivors. And knowing what we know about statistics and the clients that we see at the centre, despite the Act and the existence of the various regulations to the Act and the various sort of secondary legislation, we're still not seeing an improvement in the response.
Okay, and we'll get to what exactly that response should be in a second. Cindy, maybe I can ask you, one of the ways in which obviously Toko's story is uncommon is that she did report her rape, and as we know, actually the vast majority of rapes in this country go unreported. Is this something that you see from your work, that reporting is uncommon? Do you hear of rapes going unreported?
Yes, so much, because as an organization that is working in the communities, I would say on average, like on a daily basis, we receive about 8 cases of rape. And in most cases, it's cases involving even children as young as 6 years old. And in some cases, we have where a client would come to the office to say, I went to the police station to report the case, and no one was willing to take my case. I would give an example of a case that we had, I think it's 2 months ago, when a woman was raped in these small taxis that are operating. Like I said, we operate in Gugulethu, so there are these taxis that are called Mapela. She was going to work, she jumped into a taxi, and she was driven somewhere else, where she was raped. But when she went back to Gugulethu police station to report the case, she couldn't get the case open. She was told that she should go to Philippi police station. So in that kind of a circumstance, we can see that she was denied justice right from the beginning because the case could not be opened until she came to our office. We had to take her physically to the police station to lay a complaint and also to open the case of rape. So we are familiar with these kind of cases, and it's happening like almost on a daily basis.
Right, right. Kerrygn, from your work, do you get a sense of why it is that women would be reluctant to report rape to the police?
So I think that part of the reasoning for not reporting is the secondary victimization, which I think both of my colleagues here have spoken to. The secondary victimization received at the hands of police, at the hands of healthcare professionals. So that's one instance. Another instance is a lot of the rape cases we see at our center in Khayelitsha are rapes that have been perpetrated by people known either to the family or within the family. And that has led to a lot of reluctance to reporting.
It's been often spoken of this year and last in the wake of incidents like Marikana, and we've had a number of other incidents of police brutality, obviously, of a kind of generalized breakdown of trust between police and the community. Is this something that you're seeing, that you feel from your work, that there is that lack of trust?
Definitely, there is so much lack of trust when it comes to the police, because in so many instances, the cases, there's no follow-up to the cases. I'll talk from my experience with the work that we're doing as a Little Abantu. You know, we receive so many cases whereby people feel that they don't get progress reports. Even if they report, there's no follow-up, there's no one. In most cases, they don't even know who is dealing with the case. You know, so all the time they have to come to us for us to follow up, try now to find out who is dealing with the case. They don't even have the case number. It has to start from, you know, from the beginning to find the case number, to find who is dealing with the case. And also, even when it comes to the courts, the cases are taking so long. You know, even you find that people end up giving up. They don't even follow up. And in some cases, people get raped again, and then they don't even report now because they realize that I reported with the first time, but then it's happening again. So it's no use for me to report the case because nothing is going to happen.
Nothing is happening, right. So Sanja, why don't you take us through what should ideally happen in a perfect world when somebody goes to a police station to report a rape?
So in a perfect world, when someone goes to a police station to report rape, the police officer behind the counter is supposed to follow the law to the letter. And there are national instructions and national directions on exactly what to do when a woman or anyone else comes into the police station to report a rape or any other kind of sexual offense. The first thing is that your statement must be taken. It is not permissible for police to send you away and to send you from pillar to post, or to tell you to go to your street committee, or to tell you to go deal with it at home. That is against the law, and we see this happening on a daily basis, despite the fact that it is against the law. So the first thing is that your statement must be taken, and there's a lot of information in the legislation around how that needs to happen. Your statement needs to be taken in private, and your statement needs to be taken at a time when you feel able to give that statement. So police officers are not supposed to force victims who are in the throes of trauma to speak about what happened to them purely because they're trying to, expedite the statement-taking process. You should be taken to a private room. If there is a victim safe space or a victim interview room in the police station, that's ideally where the interview should happen. The police should also be able to give you information about where to access post-exposure prophylaxis. They should be able to provide you with a list of where you can get post-exposure prophylaxis free of charge. They should be taking you to the nearest healthcare facility to have the rape kit done. And they should also be providing you with information around where you can get counseling. Where are the nearest organizations that can provide you with those psychosocial services that more often than not, a victim is more in need of than, the services of a policeman at that particular point in time. I mean, you're more likely to need someone to talk to about what's happened than what you need to speak to the police at that exact moment in time. And so there really is a lot of duties on the police around what needs to happen, and it's just not happening. And the fact that it's not happening is very obvious. When we look at clients who come to the centre, the clients of my colleagues, as they've explained, cases never go anywhere. And I think it's that loss of faith in the police and in the criminal justice system that leads to a large amount of underreporting. I think it's one of the major contributory factors around underreporting in this country.
Right, a sense of hopelessness because you suspect nothing will be done. This is obviously a difficult question and one that it would have been good to put to the South African Police Force, but I believe they weren't able to join us. But what is it that leads police not to be able to carry out these duties in the way that it is? Do you think it's a lack of training? Is it some kind of cultural problem? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a multitude of, or a multi-layered answer to that question. I think there is definitely some cultural challenges that we're facing, or cultural barriers to dealing with rape, especially in the cases of things like marital rape or rape within families. I think that's definitely a barrier. And I think also just gender sensitization. I think we still have a police force that is very much service orientated. It's like a military operation. And I think that in itself is a barrier to dealing with issues as sensitive as rape. It's very much dealt with as a process issue. And I think, we can talk about police not responding to rape cases, but when there are formal structures in place, like your model, like the Thuthuzela Care Centre, where it is a coordinated response, you see, I think there's a certain level of support there for the police that operate within that centre. That, you've got psychosocial support, the National Prosecuting Authorities there, Department of Health is there, and then SAPS is there. So it's all different parts of the puzzle that are needed to complete it. And I think in those situations, there's a much better response from police. And that's because that support system's there. I think when we look at what the police need to deal with within their customer service centres that they have, I think that it can also get very overwhelming. So I think that there's a lot more measures that need to take place. Maybe a special police force that deals with rape, or specific members of the police force. I think there's a lot of things that we could look at. Yeah.
You mentioned the Thuthuzela Care Centres as being, as I understand it, the best practice for certainly the medical and psychosocial aspects of what happens post-rape. How easy is it to access those care facilities in Cape Town? What are we dealing with here? Have they been rolled out as government promised earlier this year, the Thuthuzela centres?
I think the ones that are operational are operating quite well. There are still a lot that still need to be rolled out, and that becomes, I think, a bit of a funding issue as well as a practical challenge. But there is movement within different health facilities, even if they're not fully fledged Thuthuzela Care Centres. They are operating as if they were. It's just that the NPA are not overseeing those facilities as yet. So a case in point would be somewhere like Victoria Hospital in Wynberg, where they offer the service, a full medical service, and they're bringing in psychosocial services, but not necessarily running completely according to the TCC model. But I do also know that the NPA are in the final stages of setting up a Thuthuzela Care Centre in Atlantis at the Westvleur Hospital. So I think there's definitely movement to having those Thuthuzela Care Centres rolled out. So I think that is a very positive movement in dealing with sexual offences.
Absolutely. Of course, what we're discussing here is only part of the puzzle and part of the problem. We're discussing what happens in the immediate aftermath of a rape. And of course, the court process can be extremely protracted and painful indeed. Cindy, in your experience from your work, what are some of the most challenging aspects about going through with that court process for a rape survivor currently?
I would say some of the challenges that are faced by the survivors is that, rape on its own, it's so traumatic, and in some cases, some of the survivors, they don't get immediate assistance in terms of counseling because they are not told where to go or what to do after, because from our experience, some of them, they go to report the case at the police station, they are taken to Tutuzela for the medical checkup, and that's it. That's the last time they hear from the investigating officer. They are not told what they can do in terms of the emotional side of this whole process. So even the courts themselves, because most of the times some people see the court as kind of intimidating. They associate it with the criminals and all those things. So obviously the thought of going to court, it's something else on its own. They need to be prepared for that as well. So I think for survivors, it becomes a very difficult process, a difficult time in their lives. They need the support, they need the counseling, they need any support that they get so that they can get through, because when they don't get those things, at the end of the day, they give up.
Right. Sanja, just rapidly because we're running out of time. Any one or two things would you think could be most critically expedited in order to improve access to justice for gender-based violence survivors?
I think if we're really serious about doing something about the problem, we need to make sure that the sexual offences courts that was mooted by the Minister earlier this year are rolled out as a matter of urgency, as well as increased rollout of those Tutuzela care centres that have been shown to be best practice in these cases.
Anything to add to that, Kerrygn?
No, I'm in complete agreement, especially in terms of the sexual offences courts, where that sexual offences court would be able to see specifically sexual offences matters, which will hopefully see speedier ends.
And would it also provide any kind of support for survivors going through the process? Who's looking after those people currently?
At the moment, where there are sexual offences courts, there are organisations, mostly non-profit organisations, like Rape Crisis, like Elisa Labantu, that are in courts that would actually walk those clients through the process and every step of the process, and where necessary, actually be in court with that person, supporting them as they testify and go through that court process.
Gotcha. Cindy, from the perspective of Gugulethu, what do you think is most critically needed in order to get justice?
I would say what is needed most is the commitment from SAPS for people to get justice. We know we've got so many cases of children that are being raped on a daily basis, and most of these cases are going nowhere. The investigating officers, they need to do the work, because as long as the work is not moving, the cases take so long to be finalized, and in some cases, the cases are not finalized because there is no evidence. Nothing has been done on the docket, or the docket goes missing itself. So I think for us, the commitment from the police is very crucial.
There we have it. Clearly, a lot to be done, a lot still needing to be fixed before the survivors of gender-based violence can really be assured of getting to that point of justice, which is sustainable and consistent for each survivor. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, ladies. Thank you for joining us.